Thank you. Good evening. I now call to order the Downtown Community Task Force meeting of August 17th, 2023. Leslie, please call roll.
Member Thompson?
Here.
Member Ondersek?
Here.
Member Mayer?
Here.
Member Von Hune is not present. Member Vargas Smith? Here. Member Reed, he emailed today asking to be excused from today's meeting. Member Coyne?
Here.
Member Tai, she also emailed today saying she'd be arriving to today's meeting late. And Member Varjane.
Does everybody want to make a motion to excuse all, or do we want to break any out?
I make a motion
Okay, to excuse all?
to excuse, to excuse all and accept Chan's being late for the meeting.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, you're excused. Leslie, please read the DCTF meeting procedures into record.
Thank you. Meetings are conducted by the chair in accordance with the following procedures. The chair of the DCTF directs all activity during the meeting. Any item on this agenda may be continued to a subsequent meeting. Special procedures time limits may be applied to any items as prescribed by the chair. Copies of the current agenda and staff reports for each of the items on the agenda are available online on the Downtown Precise Plan website as well as on the City Clerk's website.
Thank you, Leslie. We'll now move on to the consent calendar.
The procedure for the consent calendar is as follows. Consent calendar items may be enacted or approved by one motion unless requested to be removed by anyone for discussion or explanation. We have two items on our consent calendar this evening. The Downtown Community Task Force meeting minutes of December 16th, 2021, and the Downtown Community Meeting Task Force meeting minutes of June 15th, 2023. Chair?
Oops. Anybody want to make a motion?
Actually, I have to recuse myself from the June 15th meeting minutes because I wasn't
So move to accept both minutes for the December 16th and June 15th minutes.
All right, second.
Yeah, my voice is off tonight a little bit, so I'm a little bit hoarse. So I'll try to do better, thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, thank you. We'll move on to general business. Leslie?
All right, thank you. We have one item under general business this evening, and this is the City Hall Relocation Study Consultants will be presenting to you the new added case studies, concept refinements, and financial strategies for the study. So I will turn the presentation over to our consultants who are here virtually for us this evening.
Great, thanks, Leslie. I'm Jim Stickley with WRT and just want to introduce my team members, Ben Sigmund from EPS, Caroline Judy from PFAL, and Peter Winch also with WRT. And, you know, seeing all of you sitting there makes me realize we've sort of gotten out of the habit of coming down there to meet. You know, we're still in our COVID mode. So I think we need to figure out how to re-engage in person in subsequent meetings. So we'll work on that. So yeah, as Leslie said, the purpose of tonight's meeting is three things. We were asked by all of you to include a couple of more case studies. So we've done that and looked at Sandusky and Winter Garden, and very interesting case studies. So we want to present the information that we researched for those. And then the same, essentially three concepts that were presented last time. We received comments from you all. So we've refined those, and also we've done some more work to sort of prepare them for the financial analysis. And, you know, that was just digging a little bit deeper into the different elements of the plan so that those could be costed accurately by our team. So we want to present those refinements. And then we've been working very hard on the financial analysis, received a lot of the data, and have started to look at numbers. Tonight, what we want to do is really focus on explaining the process and the framework for the financial analysis. As we've gotten deeper into it, we've recognized, all of the different moving parts, as it were. And so we want to explain all of that and get your comments in terms of, does that look like the right framework moving forward? And then we would be coming back with the financial analysis itself in subsequent meeting. So that's what we hope to cover. I think, we're going to say this at the end too, but I think what we're looking for from all of you, in addition to just your general comments and reflections, is just starting to express a preference for the concept options. We have 3 options that we're presenting, and we'd like to start to zero in so that we can focus on a preferred option for the detailed financial analysis. So that's one. And then we'd also like just sort of your not so much endorsement, but your comments on the financial analysis framework. Does that look like the right approach? Do you have any comments on that? So those are the 2 main things that we're hoping to get from all of you tonight. So with that, I want to turn it over to Peter, who is going to go into the case studies.
Great, thanks, Jim. Just briefly before I get into the case studies, a reminder of where we are. We are returning to you with some refined concepts. So that's number 4, number 5, and 4 together. Really, we're integrating the refinement and the financial analysis. And we will be coming back to you with a detailed financial analysis, and it will be then brought together in a final options report, so that there's a good record of this whole process that can be useful now, and can be useful hopefully in the years ahead. So Sandusky and Winter Garden, these were case studies that were looked at initially by members of Reclaiming Our Downtown, and we certainly looked at them early on for a variety of reasons. We didn't look at them in detail previously, and you've asked us to go back and do a deeper dive, and we've done that. I'm eager to share our findings. So you can see now 2 new rows at the bottom of our selected case studies matrix. And Sandusky and Winter Garden, I think, is a nice balance in that Sandusky represents an example of a project that was done in a mixed use way. It was done in tandem with some private development opportunities. Winter Garden was more of a standalone city hall, so those kind of complement each other nicely. So we'll start with Sandusky. Sandusky, of course, much smaller city than Santa Clara, but kind of a regional center in its area. And I think, as Ben will talk about this a little bit more, a real magnet for its whole region, as a really specific sort of tourism role in Ohio and the Midwest. The city hall is significantly smaller than what we're anticipating for Santa Clara, and you can see that the site is significantly smaller than the existing Civic Center site, just orders of magnitude smaller, because it's really an urban, very nestled in the downtown project, which I think is what this group and our team has been focused on for the future of Santa Clara. The program includes both City Hall and, as I mentioned, a residential component, 18 units in a adaptively reused old building, as well as a public market and wine bar and other storefront spaces. You can see that the site, which is in a couple of adaptively reused buildings that were there, and a great opportunity, really directly on the main downtown square, on the main street, Columbus Avenue, and directly across the street from the library and an associated public parking garage. So just a really well-chosen site that presented itself, and the city tackled that opportunity and made it happen. You can see as we go a little bit closer how those buildings look. And it's not, I think interestingly, it's not just one building, it's 2. and that City Hall has a nice entrance directly onto Columbus Avenue. And you can see how it relates to the two, let's say, main blocks of their traditional downtown Main Street. This view looking towards City Hall, and you can see also in this case, we wanted to call attention to the theater nearby, another source of commonality with what we're envisioning for downtown Santa Clara, and the residential component. And then the public market wine bar, I think, is also interesting in that our downtown precise plan has envisioned a food hall as an anchor. So here we have that kind of food hall concept just really integrated into the City Hall. Ben, I think I'll turn it over to you to go into the program details.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Good to be back. So yeah, no, Peter mentioned quite a bit of this already, but it is a multi-building project, 68,000 square feet total. Quite a bit smaller than what we're talking about in Santa Clara, but still significant across all the uses. The City Hall piece itself is just over 20,000 square feet for 40 employees there, so different scale. And then Peter already spoke quite a bit about the market. There's also an apartment complex, 18 but modest 18 units in the project. And it did benefit. There's a county facility. This is the county seat. County facility across the street has significant oversupply of parking. So the project was sort of advantaged by existing parking supply in the vicinity. We can keep moving. All right, so we at EPS sort of had a three-pronged approach to these case studies. We did quite a bit of research just through what we were able to find on the city website, other news articles, media. But part two, we did interviews with city staff in all cases. In the case of Sandusky here, we had a nice long chat with Aaron Blair, who's the chief planner in Sandusky, and that's where we get a lot of the insight for the case study. And then the third piece of our work was bringing some real estate data and sort of demographic data to bear that we'll show you in a moment. The background here, this is sort of Midwest Rust Belt. So, in Aaron Blair's words, Sandusky was totally vacant 20 years ago. From that, they've really enjoyed, especially in the last decade or a decade and a half, a real renaissance. As many, I think, of these stories go, it all started with a really nice French restaurant. And so people coming into the downtown again to enjoy an evening. It's in the note here, but also this boutique hotel sort of bringing people in. It's got a lot of good bones, right? This is a historic downtown, and they really built on that. And the city was motivated to create change in this downtown, honoring its past, but looking to the future. And so this bicentennial vision, the sort of to celebrate the city's 200th birthday, really focused on how the city would become a dynamic mixed-use destination. And it is really aspirational in that it envisions Sandusky as the premier downtown in the region. And they've done a lot, including this City Hall project to move in that direction. Next slide. So the City Hall, its investment did come out of the bicentennial plan, but it also was a result of just simply outgrowing an outdated existing City Hall facility. The old City Hall is still in use for the police department and court function. It's at the edge of the city, and so when they thought about opportunities to grow their City Hall facility, they definitely looked, in sort of they're soaked in this. Steeped in this plan at the moment, and they look to the core of the downtown as a location for the City Hall. And Peter's, I think, graphics and mapping a moment ago really sort of highlighted that. They very much saw it as a deliberate move. There were, as I mentioned, this restaurant and early investments, reinvestments, I should say, in the downtown, and they wanted to build on that momentum. They did go with a public-private partnership that Caroline will talk about more in a moment. But one of the aspects that the city was quite pleased about is that though they looked to the private sector for the sort of City Hall solution, they were sort of in lockstep with the developer, sort of from the beginning. They had a lot of input on the design of the facility. So it's really built to suit, or it is a retrofit, but updated for them. And they're tenants currently, and that's a sort of byproduct of the financing. So it's and again, PFAL will comment on this, but a 7-year kind of tax credit environment. So they have to be tenants during those 7 years, but they hold an option to buy, and they're looking now to do so. Very pleased with the outcome. They're in 2 of the buildings. I think it is maybe a 3-building project total. They've got 2 of the lower floors where they have their lobby. And then in a separate building, they have 2 upper floors. And it's a relatively recent project, delivered 2019. Next slide. Here's sort of looking at what's come of this. They really do believe the City Hall has been a contributor to the momentum of investment in downtown Sandusky. The quote from Aaron is, "It's an exciting time to be in the city." And in addition to that first restaurant, there's been a proliferation of retail boutiques, restaurants, and other uses that have just sort of built on one another. I think consistent with a lot of comments I've heard at this meeting in the past, they sort of confirm that the City Hall is a good anchor downtown, and it brings people downtown. They have a variety of hearings, and they do acknowledge that with people come in for the meetings and they stick around and enjoy the downtown a bit before or afterwards. But the City Hall is not the only action, certainly, that they've taken to try to leverage the momentum, or the sort of positive trajectory downtown's on. A lot of programming, so concerts and events that they're putting on in their downtown parks, and then also they're currently planning a pretty sweeping downtown streetscape project that they hope will also kind of enhance the potential. Next slide. We looked at a number of real estate investments that have happened in recent years, and while it's difficult to say, these new projects are happening, or new investments are happening because of the City Hall, it's certainly one of the ingredients contributing to the positive trajectory. The Hogruff building there on the top, pretty interesting architecturally. I spent at least 20 minutes confirming it's a new build. I kept thinking, because there's quite a bit of historic renovation going on. This one, the developers brought quite a bit of historic character to the design, but that is a new build, and there is a parking structure within there. So kind of interesting in that regard. Largely apartments. Falcon Point Lofts, more of the kind of apartment format that we'd see commonly here in the Bay Area. What's interesting about this one is a university use on the ground floor, which I think resonated with me, sort of relates nicely to our situation in downtown Santa Clara. And then the last is actually renovation of an existing building. But here, three pretty major projects in just a couple of years, all within a half a mile or so, 5-minute walk, 10-minute walk of the City Hall. All right, and then I just wanted to show you, again, we brought some economic data to this, and it's pretty dismal, right? The blue line is and I should say this is downtown. We've looked at just this kind of half-mile ring around the City Hall, city center. So we still see employment falling, and what I mean, you can't, maybe you can pick it up, but I think it's sort of starting to flatten, right? So I'd like to believe here that what we're seeing is there was a sort of continued decline in employment in the knots, sort of 2000 to 2010. And while we do clearly see the employment trend continuing in a downward direction, I think it's flattening a bit. And we're not picking up here post-COVID just because of the data source we're using. On the household side, the housing, we do see a little uptick just recently. And I think the other thing that's sort of notable is these are occupied households. And as we understand it, this is an area that's sort of increasing as a second home location as well, sort of pied-à-terre kind of thing. And so there may be a little bit more, sort of housing related economic activity than just the household trend here is showing. But I think the positive uptick 2020 to 2023 is sort of a sign that maybe that things are turning around. And certainly anecdotally through the interview and the news articles, it's a very much a changing tide. And like I say, City Hall and the related project is a big part of that, according to the city. Turn it over to PFAL now.
Thank you, Ben. So this is Caroline Judy from PFAL. So just a couple of things to highlight here. This was an adaptive reuse and restoration of these historic buildings. And the overall square footage was about 68,000 for the mixed use development. As Ben mentioned, the objective was really to help try to revitalize some of the downtown area and spur some of the community development and economic growth. Some of the other aspects of the project included bringing a market down into the downtown area, which was previously considered a food desert. And then also, looking at the jobs creation that resulted from the project itself. And they did note and capture the number of construction jobs that were created. Those are, of course, temporary for the duration of the construction, but nonetheless important trades jobs in the area. Next slide. And okay, so this was solicited as a developer initially as a design build with the city requesting proposals. They received 3 that looked at specific sites. And this Vintage Development was the selected entity that proposed renovating these existing historic buildings. And then there were, one of the benefits of this was the synergy that existed with the county buildings that are relatively basically across the street, and using the parking from the county buildings as well to help support the city hall. Next slide. The overall financing, it was almost 10 million, so $9.8 million. 5 million of it was private financing that came from Vintage Development, the developer, and now the owner of the property. And that's an important factor. And we're going to come back to that when we talk later about some of the decisions for the city to make. But so the developer owns the property, and the city right now is leasing the property. The lease contribution is in total 1.8 million. And so they signed a 7-year lease that is funded from the annual budget. And then the way that they came up with those funds is they shifted some of the currently expiring debt that was for other city buildings, and they applied that to this new lease. They also received about $3 million in the new markets, federal new markets tax credits, and then historic preservation tax credits. By all accounts, it's been a very successful project. The tax increment financing has been planned for some additional improvements in the area. And the city has reported that their rent is approximately $250,000 a year for about 23,000 square feet. And then that's serving about 40 employees. So that works out to, I think we ran the numbers on that, it's about $11.12 a square foot for, per month for the space that they're actually utilizing. Next slide. Back to Ben, I think.
I'll start it out and then we can pass to Ben. Maybe we can do I'll talk a little less about program and a little more just about context. So you can see the city hall here again. This is just a civic building. It's a new construction civic building. Again, it looks old, but it is new and very civic in its character. And you can see its site when the parking that serves it is included is actually pretty big. It's considering that it's only a 44,000 square foot building and substantially less office space than the current Santa Clara City Hall. It is taking up a fair amount of space. But its location is very much knit into the downtown core. And so you can see it is it basically is providing a new anchor at the west. This is west to the right in this case, end of the Plant Street sort of Main Street spine. And that Plant Street Main Street spine also includes a really green, verdant pedestrian paseo that you'll see images of. You can see it's really about 2 blocks or maybe 1 long block or a block and a half from the main area of activity. But you can see this label for the exchange new mixed use. That site, that sort of gap that gap toothed part of the block, part of the street has been actually built now as a new development. So it really has become integrated into the downtown. And you can see that labeled again in a little bit more detail, and you can see the green character and the pedestrian facility that runs down the center of Plant Street. And you can see the character here, very southern, with those large canopied trees and just that very comfortable downtown environment. And some of the new mixed-use development that is on Plant Street. Another project, I think it's called the something Market, is to the west of City Hall, so has actually extended that area of activity in downtown even beyond City Hall at this point.
And Peter, this mixed use project is the one right next to
Yes,
the City Hall. The City Hall, yeah, you can see what the label is just beyond.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay, I'll take it from here, right? Great, thanks. Yeah, much of this sort of described, but yeah, standalone City Hall facility, about 44,000 square feet. And you can just see in the slide here the various, how the building's organized with council chambers, building and planning department, et cetera, on the ground floor, some human resources clerk, finance, IT, public works on the second floor. And then they have legal, admin, and some additional expansion space on the top floor. I know it's come up in this this meeting in the past. They do in fact have a lobby that features a rotating art exhibit. It's also hosts to a monthly sort of opening when they do the changing of the art, and so I know that's a nice feature of the building as well. Delivered roughly 2009, so we have a little more history on this one in terms of how it sort of fits into the downtown trajectory. Next slide. Our process was the same. In this case, we spoke with Kelly Carson, who is the planning director in Winter Garden. She's been around there for long enough to have a pretty good story about the trajectory of the downtown. So a bit about the background. Also a sort of city center that I guess really like many fell previously on hard times. Big agriculture region, specifically citrus industry, and that in the 70s did enter a period of decline. And this downtown was essentially a sort of train station downtown full of sort of packing facilities and mercantile related buildings that kind of supported the citrus industry. And so all of that sort of fell on hard times along with the sort of economics of the region. And in the 80s and 90s, the city worked hard to plan for revitalization of the downtown. But it really, for them, according to Kelly, the tide really changed with the introduction of the West Orange Trail, which is a rails to trails bike and pedestrian facility through the downtown, sort of connecting downtown Winter Garden to surrounding region. Became very popular, and sort of again. It's the story of the sort of multi-pronged approach to creating change in your downtown. Along with that Rails to Trails project, significant investments in parks, including really sort of elaborate fountains and landscapes. If you've done we didn't have the benefit as part of this project to go visit, but if you do the street view, just the pavers and the sort of character that they were able to introduce, it's pretty rich. And so I think they put a lot into it, and they definitely see the City Hall as a key piece of it. So we go on the next slide and really talk about that city hall. Like the others, it was a situation where they were turning a constraint into an opportunity. They were growing out of this. As you'll see, it's a growing city. I'll show you in some of the data. And so they were growing out of the old city hall, and actually, common theme. I think it was true in Malden, Mass, as well. They leave the existing city hall for some of their kind of operational departments. In this case, police department, and they take sort of the rest of the city civic functions and put it in a new centralized location. So I think, again, there was reference in this interview to just a commitment to downtown and really a desire to put their money where their mouth is in terms of getting, reinvesting in the downtown core. And they did that through this City Hall project. Next slide. As I say, they do see it as a big positive. And they also, I think, in addition to some of the sort of public realm, streetscape, park improvements, they've also been really active in incentivizing private development in and around the downtown. Peter talked for a moment about the Exchange, which was a city-owned parcel next door to the City Hall. They did a developer RFP, developer solicitation, and disposed of the property for the mixed-use project next door. And they had a sort of significant role in shaping that project. Through the RFP process, they did introduce a number of their sort of desires and requirements for the property. And so through their ownership and the way they handled the RFP for the Exchange, they very much sort of steered the development to be what they wanted it to be. Another example is the Plant Street Market, which we'll show you a picture of in a minute. It's this sort of market hall concept, also very close to the City Hall. There, the city waived development impact fees and also provided parking. You can kind of see it in some of the initial maps, but that City Hall property gets pretty close. And so they provided some of the rear back parking lot spaces for the Plant Street Market, which you should check out the website. It's very cool. But just another way to kind of lessen the cost for the developers and make it a feasible project and move it forward. That Plant Street Market was I'll show you in a moment, 2015. So it's sort of built on the sort of momentum of the City Hall, which was 2009. And they just sort of talked about, it's this last point on here, the snowball effect, right? The idea that once you get a little momentum, it sort of builds on itself. And they have an economic development specialist in town. And the comment there was, while most economic development specialists need to go out and do some marketing, basically in Winter Garden, they're just constantly trying to return all the phone calls because everyone's so interested in finding projects there now. Next slide. So these are some of the real estate development projects since the City Hall. The two at the bottom, the Exchange and Plant Street Market, are the ones I was just speaking about that were influenced by the city to some degree. The Exchange, again, was originally the city site, and a very new project just came out, but already, I think, nearly occupied, if not fully occupied. And the Plant Street Market is that market hall concept. And then the two above are just other examples. Those are both new builds. One's an apartment, one's an office building, but very much in the character of the downtown, that sort of mercantile style. I think just evidence of the types of investments that they're seeing through all the, as I guess related to all the various improvements they're making and their contributions to the downtown. And then I also just want to mention it. This was another one with the Plant Street Market where I had to sort of double check whether it was a historic renovation or not, but that is a new build made to look old in the style of the downtown. And then lastly here, you can see the jobs growth in the blue line. That's very positive, right? So that kind of shows more clearly, certainly, than we saw in Sandusky, that momentum downtown. I will say, though, this is a region at the moment, or a city with the wind at its back. The whole city's growing jobs. And actually, I will say, just to kind of put a little bit of a finer point on it and be a little more sober about how the success is here. This job growth downtown is at a slower rate than the city as a whole, right? So it just it's kind of a contextual thing that the economy overall is enjoying a renaissance in Winter Garden. And then it looks sort of flat, but we do see the growth in the households in the downtown as well. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Okay, so this was a design build, and as Ben indicated, the city did have a lot of input into in the design build into the requirements for the developer. They have retained ownership. So again, sort of back to one of those key questions for the city of Santa Clara about whether you want to go the route of a lease build to suit where you don't own the land and the improvements, or whether you want to go this route like Winter Garden where you're owning the land and you're having the developer come in to do a design build. Also, another recurring theme, the consolidation of the city functions are very important into the new facility, and then again, using sustainable materials and systems and being prescriptive about what they wanted to see there. And as Ben mentioned, using that, creating a historic, retaining the historic facade of the existing of this original city hall and incorporating that into the design. Those were important components. Next slide. So this was about a $12 million financing. They started construction in 2007 and issued tax-exempt revenue bonds in 2006. They did go out to the community and for this bond issuance immediately prior to the releasing the bond sale. And they're using this half-cent sales tax that was approved by the voters in 2006. The building, the new city hall, opened in 2008, and we're seeing one of the things that in that upward trend that Ben was showing is that there's a pretty high occupancy rate now of the surrounding buildings downtown, and a bit of a chicken and egg, but definitely a positive story with Winter Garden and the projects there for the new city hall. Go ahead.
Great.
Thanks, Caroline. It's
So,
yep.
Matt, maybe before we jump in, thanks Peter and Ben and Caroline for walking us through that. Are there any questions or clarifications on the case studies piece before we jump into the concept refinements from the task force? Okay, let's keep on rolling, and then but if you think of something, feel free to speak up.
Absolutely, yeah. And so before I roll through these, we want to provide ample time to also think about the financing analysis and so forth. So we'll go kind of briefly through the concept refinements because you've seen these concepts before. I'll tell you how they've changed a little bit, but just a little reminder of where we've been. We're building it on the precise plan. We've got all these really advantageous context next. And the task force selected this block D, not the 2 blocks, but really a more compact situation. And it's the land is owned by the city and the state. So, acquisition of the state land is an assumption here. Next. And, just to go over all the assumptions that go into all 3 of the options. The program would be the city hall, which is 155,000 square feet. That is based on the Smith Group analysis, and then Siegel and Strain's sort of refinements of that. We've assumed commercial amenity throughout 5,000 square feet. We've assumed subterranean parking across the whole block, and as much above grade garage space as is needed for the project to meet the precise plan parking targets. What you don't see here is the cultural space. We took that out. And the frontage activation is is along Main Street in Franklin, is in all schemes. Public realm improvements are assumed, the Central Green, the Main Street, and part of Franklin is all assumed. Though that part would be financed separate from this project using developer impact fees, which has been part of EPS's analysis earlier in the precise plan process. And then parking, again, I mentioned that it meets the target of the precise plan, but also note that AB 2097 eliminates parking minimums near high quality transit, which this site meets the criteria for. Next. And then just a little reminder, this diagram is from the precise plan, and we're meeting all the requirements of it. And there you can see the relationship of the public improvements to this project. Next. And now we get to the variables. We have two schemes that are a mix of the city hall and the mixed use, that's 1 and 2. And then you have one scheme that is solely public uses with city hall and utilities building. So starting with number 1, what we've assumed is let's just go ahead right into it. Thank you. We've assumed you can go to the next one. We've assumed a simple delivery method where the private development would be on a separate parcel, or at least some sort of subdivision if it's a long-term lease. And because it's separate, it's not as efficient of a layout as the blended scheme, which is option 2. So we've fit, you can read the numbers here, 114,000 square feet total, which includes a 10,000 square foot commercial space. So that's a depth of about 50 or 60 feet along Franklin. And all that faces onto Franklin, helps to activate it. And then the city hall would be relocated to Block D. I mentioned the program there, the amenity there. The public lobby faces the Central Green. And one of the features, and the utilities building remains offsite. Next. There's a little urban design diagram, so you can see some of the relationships. The lobby facing the green, but also Main Street. Of course, Main Street extending then to the library. It becomes kind of a ceremonial civic street. And then you can see it's kind of a thin line, but there's a red line that runs through the middle of the block, vertically, and along the back of the city hall. That's the assumed property boundary if it was subdivided. And so the parking garages are separate for each of those in this particular scheme, rather than picking up efficiency by putting it all together. And you get some images of what the public library, the lobby space might be. And one of the refinements that we've made is to enlarge the lobby space and really make something out of it in all the schemes. Next. Here's the 3D diagram. On the left, you see the corner of Franklin and Main Street and the green, how the lobby would address that. And the building might step back. There might be a terrace on the city hall edge of that facing the green, kind of an overlook. I think that's an exciting feature. And then the massing is an interpretation of the zoning code, the form-based code that's part of the precise plan. So you can see how that works out. And then on the right, you can see how the parking garage works a little better. There is a little bit of open space that's associated with the mixed-use building there, and what you're seeing is the above grade parking. And again, there's a full level of subterranean parking across the whole block. Next.
Just briefly, Matt, that open space associated with the mixed use is a rooftop terrace on
Yep.
on the parking. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. And then just a little closer view with some of the key numbers and a color code there if you're really interested. And so this kind of just gives you a sense of how the buildings might be arranged or the uses might be arranged. And Siegel and Strain, in the final report will be, getting into the particulars as far as what those functional relationships would be. Next. And then, then this is Caroline's slide, I think. Well, let
Right.
me
So
go.
this,
Yep, go ahead.
yeah, so this was just a slide that kind of gave us a sense of the sequence, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this later. But the two parcels within within Block D, the state-owned parcel and the city-owned parcel would need to be consolidated. And so there's the procurement of that property, preparation of the site, meaning demolition of the existing courthouse, and then the opportunity to take the private portion of Block D and either sell it or ground lease it for the mixed use development. And under option one, the Silicon Valley, the utilities remains off-site, perhaps in the Commerce Building, and then the city could, is one of the considerations, surplus the existing civic center after they've relocated into the new building.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
So then option two looks at basically a blended scheme. So and not worrying about sort of the horizontal segregation of the private partners piece and the city hall. It integrates the uses. The procurement method would be more integrated, and as a consequence, it also can maximize the amount of private mixed use on the block next. Just some numbers, meets the same many of the same urban design conditions, although it does a better job of facing Washington Street than option one. And also we introduced some townhouses with flats. The way that works, it's a kind of a clever way to build low-rise housing efficiently. Is there's a ground floor flat and then there's a townhouse that's immediately above it. There you go. You can see that facing Homestead. And that means that every unit there has an entrance onto Homestead, so it really helps to activate that street edge. The lobby migrates to the main street, center of the main street, and then that allows the frontage, the city hall's frontage along the green, to be fully occupied by the retail amenity. Next. Again, some 3D views.
But I think important here, and I think this is since our last meeting, in response to task force comments, the private mixed use building actually follows more closely the precise plan's sort of maximum building envelope along Washington Street.
Yeah, exactly. So you see it stepping down, and that's what you're seeing there is the full envelope that's allowed for that building. And it follows it, and it aligns the perimeter of the block, which is the most efficient way to lay that building out. And there's some, again, some open space that would be on the podium level on sort of a concrete deck that would be built above the topmost floor of the parking garage. That's the green in the back. And you can see the townhouses facing Homestead a little more clearly. So that's how that scheme goes together. Again, the numbers, and you might notice that the numbers are consistent now, among all the schemes, so that the finance analysis is comparing apples to apples as far as the City Hall program goes. Next. Caroline?
Okay, so with option two, we have a similar sequence. City Hall will relocate to the new building, to the city designated portion of this mixed use. And then the private mixed use is blended on the same parcel. And that then, of course, we had to have preceding that the courthouse procurement and site preparation, and then a partnership would have to be entered into for the shared parking, to develop the shared parking. Silicon Valley Utilities would still remain off-site, and the city could have the option of surplusing the Civic Center site after relocation to try to generate some revenue, or to ground lease that, as we'll talk about a little bit later.
Great, thanks, Caroline. So the third option puts the two public uses that are in play here, the City Hall and the Utilities building, on Block D. There's no private use. And by the way, if it hasn't been clear, I mean, these are all filling out the capacity of Block D, I think for the most part. And they're pretty, they're pretty good fit. So the public use, the same utilities building, just a reminder, it's at 90,000 square feet. We've assumed a 5,000 square foot amenity associated with that. The Smith Group report also called for a staff dining and fitness space that we've fit into that that floor area. Next. That's how that diagram looks. A very generous lobby that serves both the utilities building and the city hall. Becomes a very active space, and the retail would be accessible from the lobby as well as from Main Street. So a really active lobby, I think, is a feature of this scheme. Next. Yeah, and then you can just see on the left-hand side, you can see the lobby. It's just shown sort of in that transparent orange. There'd be a terrace above it overlooking the green. You can see a little bridge going over the alley, into the utilities building, the upper floors of the utilities building to service that. That's how that works. And yeah, a little bit of rooftop green, but not a lot. The idea is really to have all the public open space on the ground level as much as possible. Next. Summary of numbers. Next. And then we get to the program comparison here, and that is it's kind of summarizes all the numbers that we've been talking about, across the top. You can see the scheme 1, the city hall and mixed use, 2, city hall and mixed use, the blended scheme, city hall and utilities. And the city hall program is the same throughout all of them. There's no utilities building in options 1 and 2. And then the mixed use is the greatest, is 116 dwelling units approximately in scheme 1, but it gets up to about 167 units in scheme 2. Same amount of ground floor retail facing Franklin in both of those schemes. That's and then we pick up another 16 dwelling units in scheme 2 for the townhouses and flats. Not surprisingly, the FAR, floor area ratio, which is the floor area over the site area ratio, is the highest in the blended scheme, again, for reasons that it just lends itself to greater efficiency, and you get to max it out with the private development. And then the parking totals, and the parking garages are scaled to meet those requirements. What you see is the required parking, and the garages are scaled to match that. So then we also looked at the existing civic centers potential. What is the how many units can we get on there? What would be the development assumptions? What should they be? We had an appraiser that put a value to what we think is sort of the most realistic scenario, which then can serve as an offset for financing the city hall downtown, as Caroline mentioned, and we'll talk about a little further in a minute. But here's the schemes. Here's some context. The existing city hall, and it's really one of 3 blocks. And to the north, there's the Rotary Park. But then I think what a really interesting feature is there's the Civic Center Park, which has a El Camino Real address. And so there's an opportunity really to use to take advantage of that park in developing the scheme and have a little more of a boulevard effect on El Camino Real. We'll look at that more in a minute. Next. And this is the existing zoning. The reuse is going to require rezoning. It's presently zoned public or quasi-public. And so we had to make an assumption as far as the appraisal goes, and we've assumed that it would be the medium density multi-dwelling, the R3 36D zoning designation, which is the adjacent designation to the right or to the east. we've assumed in affordable housing, the inclusionary requirement, we've assumed it at its most lenient, which is that it would be 100%. It'd be for moderate affordability, no deep affordability in our assumption there, and no density bonus is assumed as a consequence. Next. And so this is the scheme that got rolled into, or this is a illustration of the numbers that got rolled into the appraisal that is accompanying the finance analysis. The parcels, 10.2 acres, you get 36 per acre. It results in 367 units. We've assumed 1 car per unit. The way this works is most of the parking is tuck under parking. It's garages that are served from an alley, so that the other side of the unit can be fully active and can face the street with porches and windows and so forth. So the parking really is concealed in, between the buildings towards the middle of the block.
Matt,
And,
not sure if you said this, but these are just the traditional garden apartment configuration, 3 stories with, as Matt said, the tuck under parking behind.
Right. 3 stories with exactly garden apartment. The 36 dwelling units per acre is a good fit for this type. It puts the parking at the surface. Some of it's in a garage, but it's the same kind of garage you'd have with a single family home. And so it avoids the high construction costs associated with a concrete garage. And I just want to emphasize really the driver for this design is to put as many entrances and as many windows facing the streets and facing the open spaces that are in the middle of the block. And the open spaces are the green areas. Some of them would be paseos, skinny open spaces. Sometimes they would open up like in the middle of the block and along a new street. We've pushed a new street through an extension of Reeve Street all the way to Lincoln. And that's a feature in all 3 of the schemes. Peter or Jim, do you want to add anything? Okay. And then townhouses. Okay, so then these are 2 stories. They might be 3 stories, depending on, whether you have a garage and a bonus in a basically utility room downstairs. It can be as much as 3 stories. And these also are arranged in a way where you're maximizing the number of entrances and windows that are facing the street and towards the mid-block open spaces. And what you see in front of each of the townhouses is just a little kind of a lighter green and all. So each townhouse gets its own private yard. It's a fairly shallow yard, but still very usable, about 20 feet deep. And yeah, and then each townhouse also has a garage that's off of the alley. And you can see, this scheme and also the prior scheme, the green kind of runs from Warburton to Civic Center Drive. And basically, when you get to Civic Center Drive, then you're looking right into Civic Center Park and onto and connecting basically pedestrians to El Camino Real in a more direct way. Next. And then this is the high density scheme. This would exceed what's allowed in that medium density zoning that we've assumed for the appraiser or the appraisal. This would occur under a planned development designation. And the way that this building type works is, again, the entrances, entrances and windows face the streets and face the open spaces. And where the parking goes in this scheme is it goes in the middle of each of those donuts, within the middle of each of those donuts, and it's wrapped by residential. It's wrapped by the residential that faces the street or the open space. So you don't see the parking garage. And then you put a lid on the parking garage, again, a concrete podium, and the lid on the parking garage then has some housing over it, but then also in the middle of those blocks is a shared open space for the use of the residents. So that's called podium apartment type. And as is typical of this type, you can get up to 75 dwelling units per acre and still stay. So this is largely 4 stories, and we've assumed some 5-story along some of the edges, some of the key edges, perhaps along Lincoln, for instance, because that's kind of a larger collector street, and also facing Civic Center Park. So that's how that one works. And, it's a much greater yield, but it's also, in our view, would be it wouldn't necessarily be certain in terms of the neighborhood's reaction to it and so forth. So we thought, for the purposes of the appraisal, that going with what you can do by right using that medium density designation was the best thing to do next. And then you can mix and match these. While there is kind of a rule of thumb that developers like to build in units that are 50, units of the same type or more, you could subdivide this and have different builders doing different things and kind of mix it up, put your highest density near Civic Center Park and El Camino Real, and then some garden apartments, where there's a little more activity along Lincoln, which is a busier street, and then the townhouses towards the more residential edge of the site. Next. So now we're going to move into the financial analysis considerations. This time we're not coming to the task force at this meeting with numbers. Rather, we want to provide you with more information in terms of how the financial analysis is put together, what the conditions are, a kind of framework for your consideration. Caroline.
Great, thank you, Matt. So in preparation for the financial model, we analyzed a number of source documents and developed potential input parameters. We're going to discuss those assumptions and discuss the parameters for potential model runs. Primarily, this is going to be a narrative discussion, as there are critical decisions for the city to make regarding real property. Some of what that is generally not discussed in open session in order to kind of preserve or protect taxpayer interest. We received some key data on Wednesday that helps modify the model, and we're going to use that data and then your guidance from this conversation to help us present findings at our next meeting. So we've got looking at several key city decisions. The city has an opportunity to really think about 4 parameters that will significantly impact the overall cost and revenue picture for the new city hall. These are the size of the program, whether that is 244,000 square feet or something less. That is a key driver of cost, obviously, for what you have to design and build. And then secondarily, whether to co-locate Silicon Valley Power or not. And then finally, to think about parking and what is the size of the parking that is needed and versus the size of the public parking. So parking for City Hall staff and versus public parking. So those variables all in driving cost in the space area. We've previously in prior presentations talked to you about project delivery methodology and some of the concepts of risk transfer that are associated with different delivery types. Ownership of operations and maintenance is another thing that we had talked about previously with you, and how that affects or can affect the ongoing cost that the city would bear with the property. And then finally thinking about are we looking at a design build similar to what Winter Garden did, or are we looking at some variant on design build finance or design build finance operate maintain, or more of a build to suit lease model, which was similar to kind of what Sandusky did with their downtown. Then again, another factor for the city to consider is about ownership. Does the city want to retain ownership of the land? Or would the city be willing to ground lease the land or sell it outright? And that is another key variable to think about and to play with in the model, because it obviously has a revenue impact if you think about selling or ground leasing. So then on to revenue. Do you have a parking fee? Is there a sales tax or tax increment financing that can be brought to bear? And then if you're in that ground lease model, you have obviously some ground lease revenue that you might be able to offset some of the costs. So all of those factors are things that the city needs to kind of weigh in on, and perhaps we'll have some more conversation about that with the task force. Okay, go ahead, next slide. So as the city determines this is sort of our sequence of operations here. We get a decision on what the delivery model is. We get a decision on ownership and revenue and co-location. Then once we have that and the city council makes an approval to move forward with an RFQ, a request for qualifications, request for proposals for the developer, then you could launch into the site acquisition and preparation, purchasing the courthouse property, assembling the parcels, and demolishing the courthouse, doing your design and construction of the new building. Once that's complete, relocating the city into the new building, and then the decision on utilities, whether the Silicon Valley Utilities co-locates or perhaps moves to a different building, and then whether the city wants to surplus the existing site or not at the beginning of occupancy. So those are all variables that we're going to take a look at, and sort of what the sequence is. Next slide. So this is a summary, again, just a reminder of what Matt presented a few minutes ago, looking at the program options, option 1, 2, and 3, with our mixed use options 1 and 2, and then number 3 is the consolidation of city functions and public use only. And I'm not going to go over the numbers again. We'll go to the next slide. So this is where things get interesting as we start to determine how the new civic center sort of stacks up and balances out versus remaining on the existing site. And we need to think about multiple parameters here, and we have some discussion with you and get some consensus on those parameters. It may be that remaining at the current site is more or less expensive in the long run than a newly constructed building, but we need to think about each of these elements and sort of consider them and weigh them out. For example, from the case studies, we've seen that some of the economic benefits that potentially result from moving employees downtown, how do those benefits stack up? How do we assign a weight to them? And how do they compare with things like perhaps the opportunity to develop housing on the existing campus? We need your thoughts on how we look at those opportunity costs and some of the softer criteria, and then thinking how we think about the quantifiable costs like operations and maintenance expenses, deferred maintenance liability, and some of those inefficiencies that result from the fact that we have operations in different facilities for the city. So all of those factors have to be considered sort of collectively, but also cumulatively, and then we can determine how we incorporate them and build them into the model. So next slide. So we built out, this is again sort of a similar kind of discussion that we just had, but recognizing the benefits. So part of the reason why we're here and all assembled and talking about this is that we recognize there are benefits, direct and indirect, with moving the city downtown, right? There's more space for staff. The space itself is more functional. We can create more housing potentially on the existing city site. There's that momentum. It's an indirect benefit of moving downtown. the increased activity and spending, and perhaps a more of a civic identity that's associated with a stronger downtown. And then how we weigh those benefits out against the costs and revenues and the revenue offsets that are described there, both the what we call one-time expenses in the sense of costs or revenue, and then ongoing. So continuing for instance, the financing cost over 30 years, operations and maintenance over that 30-year period. Same thing with revenues, just trying to highlight that there for you. One of the questions for the city is, how do you address if the city is interested perhaps in trying to maximize the revenue from property sales? Do you consider selling blocks A and B and using that revenue to help offset as a one-time revenue source, perhaps to help offset some of the costs? So let's go ahead and go to the next one. Next one. So these are just as we built out the model, some of the assumptions that we use in the model. So we're looking at a 2-year construction period with construction beginning 2026, a 30-year debt cycle, 5% interest rate over time, and the cost of issuance, the financing costs around 3%. Operations and maintenance costs, we assume we build those into the model for the new facility. We are looking at $7 a square foot and $4 a square foot for life cycle. And life cycle is your roof replacements, some of those major maintenance items with heating and ventilation equipment that needs to be replaced over the course of that 30 years. And then finally, looking at what are your parking operations and maintenance costs. We assume those at $500 a stall. And those operations and maintenance costs are normalized. We've done a number of studies where we looked at different comparative, different jurisdictions and come up with those numbers. Then on the other side, looking at the existing city center, what are the existing operations and maintenance costs of the current facility? What is the deferred maintenance? And then how do we factor an escalation factor into those expenses? So we're looking at escalating O&M at 6%. And then with deferred maintenance, you may recall that the city had a facilities condition assessment done to evaluate the existing facility. And they made a recommendation for a certain dollar value of sort of catch up of that deferred maintenance for each year. And that's a 30-year forward deferred maintenance payment to bring down that liability. So for purposes of the model, what we've done is we've assumed, and this is based on data from other jurisdictions, there's hardly anybody that is able to finance the entire deferred maintenance liability in a single year. So what we have said is, let's take that facility condition assessment dollar value, and we'll say that the city would budget 50% of that, and they would in any given year, and you would pay, make that 50% investment to reduce your deferred maintenance liability, and then you would roll the remaining 50% over into the next year. So that's an assumption that we made on deferred maintenance. Obviously, you could do it a different way, but we are trying to be realistic in looking at how deferred maintenance is caught up. And then finally, just looking at existing utility expenses for the space, and looking at an escalation factor on utilities around 8%. Go to the next slide. So this sort of brings us back to, okay, we can run out the model, but what variables do we have that we can really, turn the dials to help try to reduce some of the potential expenses? Obviously, looking at the overall space need and fine tuning that down, perhaps, there's a little bit stronger mix, maybe of remote work or hoteling spaces, those sorts of things can reduce the overall cost of space. Reducing the parking requirement, another opportunity. The co-location enables to reduce the lease expenses that are currently incurred by Silicon Valley Power. And then different delivery models, the P3 or lease back model versus the traditional bond financing, there are cost savings as well when you look at some of those delivery models. And then finally, looking at sculpted financing. So if the city has some one-time money available, maybe that it can be used at certain intervals to try to reduce the longer-term, interest and principal on associated with the capitalized with the construction costs. Go ahead, next slide. So revenue side, same sort of thing, what was mentioned, parking fees, sales tax revenue, tax increment, the ground lease opportunity on A and B potentially, also potentially a portion of parcel D, and perhaps even the existing civic center site, or not doing a lease model, but simply surplusing those properties and using that revenue as a revenue offset. Next slide. So in looking at the financial modeling, we can run the financial model looking at a traditional bond financing alone. We can look at that with an offset of land sales. We can evaluate the sort of a public-private partnership lease back with a ground lease revenue, or do a build to suit on an existing building. Maybe that's not downtown. Maybe that's a different area, that potentially could be considered with land sale revenue. And then finally, we have the existing Commerce Plaza building, and can think about what's the status of that and how do we bring that to bear in the analysis. Next slide. So that sort of brings us to our recommendation for how we might structure the comparisons in the financial model. And this is getting your thoughts on, is there a preferred option 1, 2, or 3 at this point, and then taking that preferred option and then running through the model with 3 different runs. The first, looking at a traditional financing with the property sale, and this is all for the basis of comparison. A second model run, that's a P3 delivery with a property sale revenue offset. And the third would be that build to suit option where the city does not have ownership. And so those kind of give us those bookends on the different variations on how you would approach the project delivery. And then we have that. And then we compare that against the remaining at the current site. And some of the things that I had mentioned previously, looking at your paying that deferred maintenance liability, the existing lease payments. So we bundle all those together, and then we're comparing the new facility versus the existing facility and trying to do somewhat of an apples to apples. All right, next slide. I think that. So we have key decisions that we need. What is the space program? So these we talked about earlier. So it's the same slide again here. What is the preferred delivery model? Is there a preferred ownership model? And then what types of revenue should we be thinking about or not thinking about, as it were, for evaluating as an input into the financial model. Go ahead, next slide. So that brings us to what we hope is a robust discussion here. Do we have the right framework? Have we the assumptions that we've brought to bear here, are they consistent with what you all were thinking? Is there anything else the committee would like to see? And do you have a sense yet of which of the 3 options would be preferred? And with that, I will turn it back over to Peter and James. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Caroline. So I think that was a lot. That was an hour and 20 minutes worth. So thank you all for your fortitude to listen to all of that. It's a lot of information. It's a lot to digest. But we're here to answer questions, and we'd love to hear your thoughts.
All right, thank you for the presentation. I'll look to the Downtown Task Force for questions, comments.
No one?
You want? I had one where. Oh, go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead, Atisha.
Thank you so much. It was a lot. Can we just bring everyone up on the screen instead of the discussion slide? So I think my first kind of, this is just a clarification question. I understand like some of the planning studies on the existing civic center site was just done to support the appraisal process, but not kind of really informing a long-term planning vision or zoning process.
That's right. They were purely illustrative, simply to give you a sense of, well, honestly, the site's potential, because the site's potential is more than just the valuation. It's also, has to be seen in the context of its surrounding neighborhood in proximity to El Camino Real.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
more like capacity studies. What is the yield of this site, in the context of a likely rezoning, which, as Matt explained, would be carrying over from the adjacent areas, and just something that the appraiser could have that reference point.
Yeah, and also so you just understand what the implications are for the surrounding area, because that's if for some reason you saw the scheme and you thought that's dead on arrival, that would be good to know. For instance.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, just so close to the transit that I feel like garden apartments on the entire site might not be the best use, but I did like the combination where you had some multifamily, especially that lends out to more affordable formats versus garden apartment style housing that is usually not reaching a lot of affordable levels. So being close to transit, a little bit, or a density allowing more mixed income housing product, or maybe at least having some zoning which is by block as we move away from El Camino Real could be more potentially. But I just wanted to clarify because these slides get, circulated without any caveat. And if we, before posting, if we could add that caveat to these slides, that will be good because there is a lot of El Camino work going in the background.
Yeah, good comments, Atisha. And I think also the notion of stepping down to lower density as you go north so that it sort of meshes better with the single family neighborhoods.
Yeah. I think I am sure you guys will be doing it, but just trying to understand the viability of commerce building as a utility building versus doing a new building, kind of the option 3. It will be personally easier for me to make a competitive decision if we know the cost, what it means to rehab, own, and operate a 50-year-old building versus, just going in and giving our city a new building. I think that's also like a big cost, or like rehabbing whole building might be equally as expensive or not, but like just trying to, I know Manuel had presented some initial understanding of what they are trying to study, but somehow comparing those numbers with the new or built would be helpful because I see these are 2 separate buildings, even in option 3, the city hall and the utility, so there is definitely less sharing of, HVAC system and other things, so, that's clear. I think that's kind of it, and these feasibility studies seems very exhaustive, so we'll have to take a deeper dive in once, Caroline, you deliver them, and I think it will need, more of an in-person, longer session, I would suggest, than this format when we really have to digest that information, maybe like more of a workshop. I don't know if what's in scope, but like kind of a more like point fingers and move around the numbers kind of session might be helpful to understand all this decision-making process. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you, Atisha. Other members, Dan? Question? Okay, I'll go for it, Rob.
Yeah, one of the last slides where you were listing I think it was the financing options, but it didn't seem like there was a ground lease option for that. And so I'm a little confused on that because we discussed the potential for ground lease. What was that last slide? It had sale, traditional financing. Can you pull that slide up? The 1 through 3, traditional financing, the property sale, the next one's property sale, and the other one's lease, build to suit option without ownership. So is that ground lease the last one? I'm
No, that one, this is Caroline again, that one would be just strictly similar to the Sandusky model where
okay.
you're doing a build to suit. And the private developer owns the property, owns the improvements. You could run an opportunity to purchase, but that's more of a contractual thing. But just from a financial model standpoint, what would the lease payments look like in a model run number 3 we're talking about there?
So why isn't there a ground lease option where we own the land and then we,
So that's a revenue offset, and we could, whether you ground lease it or whether you sell the property, you could build that revenue offset in. So you could do a model run number 1A and number 1B,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So traditional financing with a property sale revenue offset, 1A, and 1B, traditional financing with a ground lease revenue offset,
yeah.
sort of 1B, 1A, 1B.
That's
kind
what
of concept.
I don't like selling land. It's just,
Yeah.
because you regret it down the line. So that's really why I'm thinking about that. All right.
Yeah.
That was the only question, but I have comments.
I
I'll do
just
later.
have one clarifying on your question. So does that mean, Caroline, we will going to have A and B for run 2 as well? Because
Yes.
P3 models are usually like ground lease. Okay.
Yeah, so you do an A and a B. Mhm. And if the consensus is, we really don't like selling land at all, then we, we can just eliminate looking at the property sale and only consider a ground lease and how that would play in. But it might be worth the sort of intellectual exercise to see it with the property sale and how that affects the annual payments out over the 30-year period.
I'd really like to see all options. I mean,
Mhm.
this is all, it's easier to do it now than to regret it.
Right, yeah.
Right? So, thank you.
A couple questions. So, I mean, unless Dan, you want to go or
No,
you?
you go.
Okay. So, are you looking for kind of a little bit more refinement, right? So we're not studying all of them. I just my own opinion. I don't think the way the state's going with their laws and being on El Camino Real, 24, 36 units an acre is something that is going to be acceptable for that. So I think I would stress probably leaning towards more the hybrid, which is the 45, and also looking at the 75, because I think reality is it's going to be there. We currently have something proposed kind of between those two limits now in our area. So I would go for one of those. And then would you run all 3 financial models, or you're looking for us to pick more what? What?
Our
You have
preference
5.
would be which of the 3 options is most,
Yeah,
exciting to
and then run them.
task force, and then run one of those. And so we're running them sort of 6 variations, right? But so it's, option 1 is your mixed use, sort of smaller mixed use. Option 2 really maximizes your mixed use, and option 3 was your city only, public use only.
So 3 runs, but preferably on one scheme, if possible, is what we would prefer. If we can get it to one scheme. And it also ties back to Atish's point about the commerce building and the utilities. If that is feasible, then obviously option 3 goes away. But we don't know until we know a little bit more about the feasibility of the commerce building.
Well, and the commerce building would not be the only offsite option. But is relevant in the context of wanting to build momentum for the precise plan.
Yeah.
Go for it.
It might be good just to, I don't know if we can just flip between option 1 and option 2, because I think there were some enhancements to option 2 that made that more attractive. Turning the corner, activating Washington Street, getting more density. So this is getting a really good yield now. Does that make it attractive enough to where option 1 starts to be less important? So does this start to constitute a preference? So that's a question just to put out there.
Right.
Jim, could you clarify the parking strategy for option 2? Is it like one garage or is it again a split garage?
No, it's one garage.
Okay.
It's all three options have a subterranean level. In this case, there's no actual property line or suggested property line. It would all be, well, in terms of how it would be phased. For instance, the garage might have a podium level that then the developer comes and builds on later, for instance, which would allow you to use public funds for the construction of the parking garage, or public finance mechanisms for the construction of the parking garage under that scheme. That's a possibility. I don't want to make any guarantee on that, but that's one of the conversations we've had within the team. And yes, you get a chance to optimize it. We've seen a few very preliminary numbers, and there is more revenue. It's not proportionate amount of revenue, but there's some more revenue that's generated by this scheme than the scheme number 1.
At the show, were you also asking about operationally? How would it work? Like, is City Hall parking all on the subterranean level and the residential parking in the above ground levels? Was that part of your question?
I mean, that was kind of like I was not liking the split garage option in the scheme 1. Personally, like I'm all in for shared parking, like off hours. And, like I know they're, like even like in a high transit area like this one, I would not have like dedicated parking stalls per apartment. Rather, kind of not number a stall and say you park on 78, but like kind of more of a homogeneous parking arrangement there. So definitely I do not like the split garage option. And my preference is with this option. I think in this option, what I really like from option 3 is somehow the lobby talking more to the green space than the retail. I know we have a lot of retail configurations, like this green is on 4 corners and all of those will have retails around it. So maybe this green could be more about a civic cultural kind of a place where, some of the city hall functions could be much easily overflow to the public realm than lobby facing the main street where it's, it should be a really nice main street too, but I just find that like that Franklin connection goes missing to the city hall in this option at ground floor because it will be a retail storefront. And I liked the option 3 for that urban design component more. But if I have to choose between option 1 and 2 to performas, I would prefer 2 with a P3 model, just given the garage is shared, and we might be able to do a P3 model test out much easily in this option.
Could be a little bit of a hybrid where we shift the city hall configuration a little bit closer to concept 3, but I'll otherwise do the concept 2.
Yeah, the lobby could be the activator to the green, which is what we've done in both concepts 1 and 3.
Yeah.
So I think that's a fair comment.
I just want to remind everybody, we're not here to design a city hall.
Yeah.
I mean, we're at the last couple months of getting the plan, and I'm going to start beating you guys up about schedule here because we're not going to be finished in this meeting. So I'm going to need a very detailed plan for when we're going to get the rest of the information, because we're planning on going in November, right? October, November? Well, I know we'll get the update later, but I'll wait. I won't put you on the spot. But I just want to remind everybody, this is just a hypothetical. It's got to have all the components, the right square footage. At the end of the day, it's a metric. It's not, the final.
And for example, like I like scheme 2, whether you slide City Hall up to the green and just move the retail down to the other retail, that can be done. So I guess I'll talk a little bit about which one I prefer. I like this one the best because City Hall's on the main street, which connects with the library in a way, so it's sort of a civic walk. I worry about City Halls having plazas in front. Mountain View's plaza's dead. I mean, San Jose's plaza's dead. I kind of want as much retail on Franklin as possible, but again, like Adam said, we don't have to get into those minor details. Everybody should understand that those red spaces can be flopped around and something can be shifted, but essentially it's the model, right? And my only concern with this model is the fact that it's this shared building. And I don't know, how does that work in terms of two entities and getting along, in terms of, so, but I like it otherwise. That's just the one thing that I
The shared building, meaning which two entities, Rob?
well, it's just two owners, right? I mean, essentially. And so it's anytime you have more than one owner, you could have disagreements.
Right.
But in different buildings, right?
Are they in different buildings completely?
Different buildings.
Yeah.
So the
Oh,
city
okay.
hall is only city hall.
Okay.
Maybe go to the 3D, Matt, just for a little
Got it.
clarifying. So the city hall functions are only in the city hall building.
Okay, good.
And then the other building is all a residential building with ground floor retail on Franklin.
Okay.
Right, and the parking sits either above grade and behind those buildings
Mhm.
or across the whole bottom.
Got it. Okay, so then I don't have
So there's
any.
kind of like three pieces. They're kind of like three pieces that they interlock, but they're separate.
Okay, well then, I have no issues. I think I like two the best.
Matt, could you clarify?
If I could, yeah, sorry. So if we could go just, and sorry on time, 1, 2, and 3, as far as garage, accessibility to the public after City Hall goes home. I'm kind of opening that up to the group, because if we go apples to apples, where we put City Hall downtown, one of the greatest advantages is if this is a 60-year-old building, it gets rebuilt, you're going to have to put a parking garage or a structure here that will not be utilized by a downtown. You have a garage structure there. What garage structure is most usable to the public after City Hall goes home?
I think any of these, it just depends how the entrance to the parking garage is designed and how the circulation within the garage will be designed. Because you can always have separators and, commercial parking and residential parking separators, and those gates can open and allow circulation.
I think information technology goes a long way to getting things fully utilized. A sign out in front that tells you how many spaces are available at which level. And there's also apps now where you can just know where the space is that you might want to park at.
Okay. And
Yeah, this chart isn't breaking parking out by use, but we really assign these spaces to either the public function or the residential uses. And I think our assumption is that the city hall, the public parking would be available after hours as shared use parking. So it would be a reservoir, as you say, Adam, to support the downtown. And the only distinction I would, assuming that it would be designed in a way that would be accessible, the distinction would be that the city hall, the full civic center relocation to the block would provide more public parking.
Right.
okay.
Now note that parking garage is one of the most expensive on a square foot basis components,
That's right.
of any one of these schemes.
Right.
Which of course was the motivation between AB 2097, and we're implementing the precise plan. But from a performance standpoint, just know that it does have implications.
Okay, and last, I'll keep it short. For Caroline, on key model assumptions, the loan rates, are we considering TIFIA at all?
Yes, so that we can go back, and look at what is the potential source of financing and what is the interest rate associated with that and build that into the model. The model is very flexible. We can, as we were talking a little bit earlier, someone suggested a workshop. We can play with the model in real time and see how different assumptions on the interest rate and the cost of issuance affect the outcomes.
Yeah, okay, and that's what the 30 years, does
Yeah.
that reflect that?
Yes, the term, so yes, and now you're challenging me on TIFIA, and I'm thinking
It's
back in my
okay,
mind,
it's our,
what is the term on
no,
TIFIA? Is it
it's
different than 30
thir-
years? But yeah.
It's 35 and it goes
35.
up to 75.
That's
And
right.
then,
It could be longer.
right, and 5% is close.
Yeah.
And I think that's all I've got for now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
When,
You're welcome.
when you run the financial model on one of the options, I mean, how granular is it going to be? Is it going to show, broken down into the different categories of, city hall component, mixed use component, parking component, so we have kind of that cost analysis?
So we are running the model on the city hall component. We haven't built it out to run the model on the private element. I mean, I believe it could be done that way. It just hasn't been built out
Okay.
the way that I've seen it. And I don't have the modeler on the phone here with us, so can't quite answer that. We could certainly find out. We end up with the parking separated out, the the components of the cost components, site acquisition, site work, infrastructure development, street, utilities, all those sorts of things are all elements in the model.
But the way that the private development is reflected in the analysis, Caroline or Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we're either showing it as a land sale or lease back value, right?
Right.
So we're not trying to estimate the cost of building that project. We're just looking at it as here's a development site that
Correct.
we would either sell or lease to a developer, and it has this value based on its allowable density. And then that value can be reflected as an offset to the cost of the city hall project.
That's correct. Yeah. Thanks, Jim, for that. Yeah.
So realistically, it's just going to be, whatever the unit count or floor count is, rentable square footage and CapExed out, and whatever the lease back is, right? Okay.
Correct.
I'm just trying to understand what the expectation, what my expectation should be on what we're going to receive. So it's just for how it integrates into whatever adjacent to it, what benefits it gets from that adjacency.
That's right. I mean, we end up with mixed use parking CapEx reimbursement and a sale of property or ground lease reimbursement.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Just real quick, first of all, thank you for the presentation. It was a little bit overwhelming, especially for some of us who are not architects and developers. But very quickly, I know we're not in the business of designing this, and I think that's how we should look at this. So in looking at it from that viewpoint, the option number 2, if I'm hearing correctly, maximizes heights, which is a part of our precise plan. So I think that has to be a key component. Second one is activating homestead. I like the idea of the townhouses to match Benton Street, but I think making sure that's activated. The third is if we're having a public building, I agree with Rob about plaza, should face Main Street. It should be a secondary entrance, not a primary entrance, which is what Franklin Street is. And for the historic side of it, oftentimes these types of buildings are on Main Street in USA. And then the last one is when we're looking at the design on this, I think when we're looking at Franklin Street, whatever goes in there, whether it's retail or something else, we should make sure something's in there that's going to make sure that space is activated for the longest part of the day. Entrance for a city hall 8 to 5 and it's done. So not looking at design, just looking at practicality, tying into a precise plan. I think those things have to be addressed.
Right. Thanks,
So,
Butch.
so you need the option, which I'm hearing quite a bit, similar selection from the committee. What other items are you looking for us to provide direction on?
I think the delivery model, so, Atisha was saying P3 would be one that would match well with this scheme. I think any other comments from any of you on the different delivery models that Caroline talked about?
Just a clarification. Caroline, now that they've indicated a preferred scheme, do you do more than one delivery model, or do you do?
Yeah, I would still run so you can
Okay.
see the differences in the delivery models, because that's
Okay.
going to be an important element.
And what kind of guidance around the delivery model would you like to get from the task force?
Well, I mean, if there is an interest in P3, I think that is probably helpful to go that direction. If we can then maybe contrast that with the lease build to suit approach. And then, our number one model run was really a traditional financing, which is more of a design build type approach. So it's not a P3 generally. So
And we
expressing
want
three
both,
different models there.
and we want both 1 and 2 to have a leaseback
An
option,
A and a
correct?
B, yes. Mhm,
An A and a B.
mhm,
So I think, yeah, that's
mhm.
pretty good direction.
So
Yeah.
it would be
Term.
5 different models on one option.
On two,
Mm, two.
option two
Well,
and three.
I'm not saying option 1, I'm just saying on an option.
Yeah, okay.
Correct.
We haven't selected, I just,
Correct.
sorry.
I just have one clarifying question. So how would traditional financing method might work on design option 2, where we are having a shared podium? So like the podium roof will be sold to a developer to build on top of it, or just trying to my brain is not thinking right now to understand how that will work when the garage is shared.
Yeah, I actually think your brain is working, and I think that's a really good point, because that would be a challenge in a traditional model where you're doing a design build. I mean, the design build would be exclusively the city building, and then it's going to what we had talked about internally as a team is that the parking would be delivered by the city, and under that model. So you can still do it as a DD.
Yeah. And I think I heard something about the open space. The open space uses the open space standards. So the amount of podium space that would be associated with the mixed use building, the residential component, is scaled to what the requirement would be.
All right.
So under option 2, because it has more units, it would be a larger open space.
So I'm hearing we need to just come back with clarity on how the parking is working and how the land would be provided to the developer portion of the project.
I think we can make the decision tonight. We don't have time to come back. Sorry. So
Yeah, that's great.
what do you? Yeah. Sorry. We're gonna make the call. So, what are those questions? You want to know who's going to deliver the parking? I would have the developer deliver the parking because the city doesn't have the money to deliver it. So I would put it on the developer, and then we could do a lease back there, a lease back for the parking spots if need be. That's what I would say. You guys can all comment, but that's how I would do it. I would put it on them, and we'll own the building of the city hall, but I think putting it on the developer, that's part of the benefit of doing a public-private partnership on this one.
I agree.
Okay. What else are you looking for?
There's a number of things that's here. The A and B block whether that should be linked to this particular project or not, whether for instance, the sale or the long-term lease of blocks A and B could be considered an offset for the costs in bringing the Civic Center downtown.
If you're going to use the lease payments or the sale payment to offset the cost, I would say
I
yes.
think I'd let
I,
Caroline clarify further.
But that's what you're
Yes.
asking, right?
Yes.
Leverage that land either in in lease payments or sale. I would say, I would say yes.
Right, and to bring it into the orbit of this particular project, because I mean, it's a city asset that could be used in a number of different ways, right?
Yeah, you could.
Okay, my brain's now, so we're saying like a 99-year.
Well, they're just saying, do they want us to consider that in the financial model? So do you want it to
Correct.
offset
Yes.
the cost? And I would say yes, because the land, yes.
I would say I don't know, because I know in some initial parts we were also considering that will also give us money for capital improvements to build the streets and other infrastructure in the downtown. I would personally keep them as separate financing phases. And I don't know if in the whole picture, I just don't want the capital improvement to get dropped out in the whole conversation. So like, as we are looking at these studies, we need to bring back those threads of how we're going to pay for the streets, how we're going to pay for the utilities, like what's happening, not make these just pure development projects, because the capital improvement of Franklin Street is a major project and somehow needs to be funded if we want a nice downtown as a priority. I know the project should deliver like block by block as they go into development, but there will be still a lot of work that will need to bring it, yeah.
But,
Ben,
no,
This
hold-
is all
hold-
hypothetical.
Hold on,
Yeah,
hold
but
on.
this is all
Jen, go
hypothetical,
ahead.
right? I mean, it's
Yeah,
just, we're
so-
running an in-depth, very complex data analysis to see how much this might cost. So I think we need to remember that this is all hypothetical. You know, the city hall is not being built yet. There's no decision that's been made, but we need these numbers to help us make the decision. So I think when we get into the weeds of talking about specific design things, it's like we're putting the cart before the horse. We are not there yet. So we need to just focus on right now, what do we want to add into our data analysis model that is the hypothetical situation that we think might happen, that then will allow us to best compute the cost analysis.
To respond to Atish's point or question, and I think it is totally consistent with this. And Ben, I'm going to actually invite you to describe, but I think that the offset cost associated with blocks A and B would be about either the long-term lease value or the sale value of the property, but the property would still also be contributing to the developer who makes use of that long-term lease or buys the property, would still be contributing to the development impact fee that would be funding the construction of Franklin Street and other amenities downtown. I think it's both, not one or the other.
My question
Well, I
is,
think-
when you do the model with the land, you're going to show it as a deduct, correct? It's going to be a line deduct,
Yes.
so we can remove it if we want. Please
Right,
include it.
that's
Thank
exactly
you.
what I was
That's
going
right.
to say. It's just.
I
it's a
was trying to
value.
jump in, but I wanted to let you go first, but I'm like,
Yeah.
put it in, as long as it's a line item and we see it, we can
It's a
remove
line
it and
item.
add it back in.
Yeah.
Right. And the
Thank you.
street, so we did include public infrastructure costs for street development as well. That's a line item as well.
Perfect.
In the cost, in the
Yes.
cost
Yeah.
side.
And I want to include it so we can see it, because that data is actually useful to us.
Yes.
All right, thank you. What else? Just want to make sure you guys get everything you need.
Assumptions for the utilities building.
No.
And
I mean, Manuel was removed off the project, poor guy. He's not going to get his utilities building. They have a utility yard on Walsh.
Yep.
They'll figure it out.
okay.
Agreed.
I mean, that's, if anybody doesn't agree with that, but they own a lot of property, they back up from Martin to Walsh, they have a yard, I think that they need to utilize that.
They don't need to be connected.
They should have bought Owens Corning.
Okay, I'm a little rummy. What about the lease of Warburton playing into this?
They're doing
Okay,
that.
got
They're
it.
doing that.
All right, good, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. What else sorry, I just want to make sure you guys get everything you need.
I think, I mean, it's basically these three questions. So is this the right framework? Does the framework we've presented make sense?
And-
which option, and so I think we're zeroing in on that.
So-
And is there anything else you'd like to see considered?
So when you run the Warburton property, are you gonna run all 4 of those models? Or are you looking for some direction on that as well? Because you had a bunch of different densities, which would obviously capitalize
No.
out separately.
I think the existing Civic Center site is being treated simply as an offset here, a potential source. And
Correct, but based on whatever density we factor, it's gonna give it a land value,
Right.
right? So we would need to know what that land,
I
what that
think-
would be,
I-
or
I-
agree to the density.
yeah, I think for the purpose, and someone else can step in, but I think for the purpose of the financing analysis, it's safe to make the assumption that we made, given that given that the 36 unit per acre density is the most established.
No,
available.
no.
Hybrid.
I mean, I mean,
Yeah, 36 is
there's
low.
there's no way. I would do at least the 45, but I would even push it. It might not be the 74, but yeah, like 50, 60 area.
I mean,
No,
if-
we have to,
If we zone it like just commercial, then we can just have the commercial densities play, like not go with the medium density zoning, but go with the commercial zoning on the other side, and that will just give you the flexibility.
yeah. I don't want a bunch of donuts over there, but I think that, yeah, something in the 50, 60, on the one side, and then, again, what Letitia said earlier, ease into the existing neighborhood edge, I think is important for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, sorry,
So,
I
yeah,
just, yeah.
if you want to just give us a target, say 50 or something like that.
What's the
We
difference,
can,
30?
we can come back we can come
60?
back with an illustration of that.
Yeah.
I'd be fine with 60.
I mean, it
Let-
doesn't
let-
also mean
what's
that
the
we're
current-
returning.
Hold on,
There's-
Leslie, what is in our
Current
general
density.
plan?
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to take a metric that's there.
Okay, well, it's currently public, quasi-public.
No, I know, but
You
what,
wanna
no,
know
I'm saying
commercial.
like some of the tiers, so I know like very
Okay.
high is 70 units an acre. What's the next one down? Sorry.
One
Oh, you
second.
know what? I actually have the general plan up.
Yeah. I was
Hold on,
getting
give
the
me a
same
minute.
question.
I actually have it for another,
So
think
high,
the-
high density is up to 50 dwelling units per acre.
high density. And then very high, is the next one very high?
So there is no very high, except for if you look into Tasman or into possibly the station area, which those go
This-
very high.
So this high is without density bonus, correct?
Correct,
50
this-
GU.
yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
so 50 is fine, then you can
50.
do
Okay,
density,
yeah,
80%
we'll do
density
50.
bonus, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and that's in our general plan, so it has a basis for it, so that makes
Great.
sense. Okay,
That's
thank you.
helpful.
Yep. Is there anything, we'll vote on the last, the option, the last one.
Well, there's just, and it's probably relatively minor, and it may be implicit in the idea of the private developer handling the garage, but it's just a question about parking garage revenues as being applied towards the financing.
Not if we're gonna have the developer build it, right? We're not gonna get any revenue stream from it.
Caroline, is that,
Would I be
is
Yeah.
correct?
that how you,
You're
is
gonna
that how you
charge for it,
interpreted
it will be
that?
charged parking, correct?
Huh?
It will be charged parking.
Well, that's what he's asking, would we get a revenue stream, but if we said we don't wanna
No.
build the parking,
If we don't
and we're
build it, but
leasing it.
developer can still charge
they can
it.
still charge for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not,
Got it.
We-
But
he-
that's not going to
That's
help
there,
your.
yeah.
it's not gonna help us,
That
they
doesn't help
built it.
Right, it's not a revenue offset.
It's not a revenue
Got it.
offset, right?
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because we can't afford to build it, unfortunately.
But then we don't have to pay for operating it too, correct? 500?
Correct. We
The-
would lease spaces from them.
Yeah. Caroline, actually, one quick question, that $500 per space was annual, correct? Like,
Correct,
uh,
that's annual.
yeah, is it possible to add some of those metrics in that chart so we know what the numbers per square feet are annual or monthly?
Yes, and then in the model, we cost it out, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
good, yeah.
All right, we should take public comment, I think, if we're kind of, if those were all the last of your questions, so that
Yeah,
way, okay.
That's good. Thank you. Those
Yeah,
are-
no problem.
that's great
Sorry.
input.
Sorry, I want to make sure you guys have everything you need. So we'll go to public comment. So anyone in the public, yep, that's here, we'll go with the people who are here first, and then I'll take the people who raise their hand. So if you're online, please raise your hand. We do not have a chat function. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you. I want to thank WRT for all the work they put in. There's a lot of food for thought in what you've presented tonight. I want to thank you for all of that information. I do have a question, but it's not in regards to this. Can I ask it now? I cannot. Will I have an opportunity to ask afterward?
100%.
Thank you.
Thank you for holding that comment. Anyone else from the public? All right, we'll go to the Zoom call-ins. I see one hand. Noah McDonald, welcome.
Noah, you should be able to unmute and speak.
Yeah. Yeah, so I just wanted to say, yeah, I believe I believe it was the third option, or whichever one where the city hall is its own thing, I think would be the best idea for this, since I just think like if it's too many different things being put into it, I think it'll just make it complicated. And then as for like which way it faces, I think possibly facing the street, or I think maybe facing the street and then as like the main sort of entrance might work. Just when it comes to that type of thing, I think that would just depend. That would come later. That would just depend on what would make it the best styling for it, so it doesn't look, so it doesn't turn out to be something that's all kind of crazy. If it's trying to be like, it's trying to face a park with the little parklet and the street, and then something like that. But I think, yeah, keeping the city hall just one use, I think would be the best idea.
Thank you. And you know what? Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak on tonight's issue? Please raise your hand, or item, I should say, not issue, item. All right, I see no other hands. I'm going to close public comment and go back to the DCTF for further discussion. Would anybody like to make a recommendation on which option we would like them to review?
2.
You want to, okay.
2.
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess we should make a motion, right? So we should make a motion.
Yeah, make a motion.
You want to make a motion?
Sure, I make a motion to choose option 2 as the preferred option to run the pro forma analysis for next steps.
Second.
Okay. And it's everything we talked about with the 50 unit density for City Hall and all that. So okay. All in favor of studying option number 2, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? No? Okay. I mean, no, I know. I said it wrong. All opposed, please say no. I know, it's kind of weird. All right. The ayes have it. So option 2, and with the parameters that we all discussed.
Great.
Thank you all. We really
Thank you.
appreciate.
Very helpful.
Question.
Very efficient meeting.
Before
Thank you for that.
Before we leave though, so when would we expect the report back?
Leslie, we need to discuss that with you.
Yeah. Our intention would be to come back with the more specifics in terms of the financing.
Okay.
And then we'd be running concurrent with developing the report.
Okay.
So we'll have to coordinate with Leslie in terms of when we can catch your next meeting and when you have space in your agenda.
September 21st.
Correct. Yes,
There you go.
21st.
correct.
September 21st.
All right. See you then.
See you then. Perfect. And hopefully in person, right? You did
Yes.
mention, we would
Let's
love
do
to see
that.
you all in person. It's
Let's
been
do that.
great.
Let's
I mean,
set that as
it
our
has been.
intention.
Yeah. No, thank you all, really. It's been great. I'm looking
Awesome.
forward to the report. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
All right. Bye-bye.
Public presentations.
All right. we will be moving on. So we'll go to public presentations. This is for anyone who would like to address the task force on items that are not on the agenda. So Mary, I know you had said you had something to ask. Anybody in the audience, please raise your hand. We'll call on you after we go through the attendees in the audience.
Again, good evening. My question is, I want to know if the form-based code, the EIR, and the precise plan are still on schedule to be heard in by planning in September and then to go to council in October.
Through that now.
I do want an answer to that.
Can we do have a section for schedule.
What?
We do have a section for the schedule that we're going to go over, and I have a bunch of questions about it as well.
Okay.
So we'll go through it in
I'll
detail.
wait,
We
but
will
then I
address
have-
your question.
If there is any delays, I want it on record that I would like to know what they are and when to expect and for how long. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Are there any other members of the audience that'd like to speak? All right, we'll go to public comment. I see Jonathan Evans. You can unmute.
Hello, is my audio coming through?
Welcome, we can hear you.
Okay, so I've been doing quite a bit of reading about some of the recent bills that have gone through in the state, like SB 330. And one question I had, and I'm not sure how we can consider this, is that SB 330 puts some restrictions on rezoning for changing zoning that was in effect as of January 1st, 2018. And as that, they restrict a plan or a general plan amendment from creating less intensive uses, which includes some options that looks like, but is not limited to reductions in height, density, or floor area ratio, new or increased open space or lot size requirements, new increased setback requirements, minimum frontage requirements, or maximum lot coverage limitations, or anything that would lessen the intensity of housing. And so, given what we have for our current plan and the form-based code, and the fact that the existing zoning, I think, predates 2018, I'm curious what effect SB 330 would have, if any, on the plan. I know in some cases we're intensifying things, but I'm not sure if that's the case across the board. So it'd be good to understand the effects on that. So thanks.
Thank you, Jonathan. Larry Oliveira. Go ahead. Welcome, Larry. You should be able. Oh. You should be able to speak. I don't know if you give him permission. I don't see his little microphone.
That's weird, yeah. Let me try it again.
Larry, you want to go ahead and unmute?
Yeah, that's weird. I don't know.
Just talking permitted.
Remove his permission.
Oh, he just dropped.
I see him.
Oh, there he is. It's changing.
I don't know why it won't let him.
Don't you have to push 9 if you're on a phone or something? I don't know, Larry, if you're on a phone,
Yes.
but I think you have to push 9.
Star 9.
Or star 9. If you don't have the Zoom app.
Yeah, it doesn't show that there's
Yeah.
connected to him.
Okay. Okay. What do we do? Sorry, I'm going to put it on you.
Larry, you could try to drop off and rejoin. Otherwise, I could try to, hold on, let me see if I can promote him as a panelist.
Okay.
Okay, Larry, if you can hear me, hopefully, I'm going to promote you as a panelist. You'll need to accept.
He might.
That's
maybe,
not even working.
Yeah,
I don't know.
he might not even. He might accidentally have his hand up too. I know I've done that before. Okay.
Sorry, I don't know.
All right. I think we're gonna have to close close public presentations.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just say, Larry, if you'd like to email in your comments, I can pass those out to the commissioners after this meeting.
Sorry, Larry. We'll close public presentations and we'll go on to staff report for schedule update.
All right. There we go. Make it big. Maybe. There we go. Okay, here we go. So this is our schedule, how it's shaking out right now. The submittal from the consultant of the final draft precise plan and form-based code is due to me by the end of August. Their goal is actually by the end of next week, but I'm going to say to the end of the August.
Do you want questions as we go, or you want us to wait?
Sure, no, go ahead.
We'll get that right away, I'm assuming, because it's going to be pretty extensive.
Yes.
And
I
then,
will send that out and post it on our website.
Perfect. And then I would say probably we're going to have to get all of our comments independently, because I don't think we're going to be able to talk really about it in the meeting. So you'll have to have your comments ready by the September, and we can put that on.
Yep.
And then any revisions that we have from there, we'll probably, it sounds like they're going to have their financial report, so they'll be here. We can go over it with them and hopefully make any final last-minute changes as we do the historical landmarks and planning commission.
Right. So and
That'd be-
hopefully there
would that
aren't a lot
be-
of changes because we've been over this a lot.
There are a few things that we have not gotten back from all of the comments sent in.
Oh.
Whoops. Did I?
Nope. Sorry, that was me. I hit a button.
Oh. No, I wouldn't expect a ton, but I would expect a few, because there were a few that they said they were still working on an update and that they didn't respond back.
Okay.
So those are the ones that I would be
Gotcha.
looking for. Not trying to hunt new ones, trust me.
So, okay, so there's that. So then that will go to our September meeting for last discussions before going to Planning Commission and City Council. Our environmental impact report is completed. We received 3 comment letters. The consultant has prepared the response to comments. Those responses are with our city attorney right now, so that is wrapping up and will be ready to go to Planning Commission and City Council. I will be going to our Historical and Landmarks Commission meeting on September 7th as a study session, just to present the revised form-based code and plan for their comments and input, which I'll summarize and forward to the DCTF as well as to the Planning Commission and City Council. That leaves us with our Planning Commission hearing on September 20th or October 11th. So originally we were targeting September 20th. Given the timing of when we're receiving the final draft plan and letting the commission have one more chance to look at it and discuss before going to Planning Commission, September 20th is difficult. The fallback date is October 11th, so that just, really depends.
Is there any way we can move up our 21st meeting or no?
Move the Planning Commission meeting?
No.
Oh, move,
Like
yes.
ours up a week?
That's possible.
Just
yes.
up 1 week, so we're on the 14th, we just told them the 21st.
Right.
But I'm just thinking
Yeah,
from
that's a possibility. I can look at city
if
schedule.
it works for staff and it's available and everything,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that might, if it's 1 meeting a month, I don't think it matters. I think it'll
let's
help
look
us.
at that.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry. Well, we have to ask them for that.
Yeah.
Well, because we just told them the 21st. I know. So, but that might be a decision for us.
Right.
Well, we'll decide with Leslie based on the conversation Jim has with Leslie about their timing, and then also the availability of the 14th. We'll make the decision if it goes the 20th or the 11th,
Right.
I guess.
Right.
So you'll let us know in a couple days.
Yeah.
You'll reach out. Thanks.
Yeah. Let me just make a note. Okay, so that, Planning Commission, September 20th, next one's October 11th. There is a second Planning Commission meeting in October as well, if necessary, but not ideal. Lead time I have December 5th for City Council. Lead time for getting reports started in that process through our city process. I have to start my staff report through our review process on October 24th. So sticking to September 20th, October 11th gets us to December 5th, and that's what I'm going for.
I have a quick question. So, WRT is supporting both the City Hall relocation study as well as the precise plan. So,
Correct.
I mean, do they have any direction on what to prioritize? Is that possible? And then
The precise plan and the form-based code are the
Okay,
priority.
great. And then just a clarification question for myself. I mean, when the city council hears, or the hearing that's scheduled for December 5th would just be on the form-based code, and then would the
They'll be on
city-
both.
So the city hall
They're gonna go
relocation
together.
is also included?
Maybe not the city hall relocation, if that works out, great.
Yep.
But the priority is getting our
Precise
price
plan and the form-based,
and
okay.
form-based code.
I just want to understand how intertwined those are, because if, it's, yes, we are all on this, track to get the form-based code across the finish line, and I'm just pitching an idea out there, like if for some reason trying to finish the city hall relocation is stalling that, is it possible to sort of make sure we prioritize the form-based code?
Yeah, definitely
And
the
the precise
priority.
plan.
And the city hall relocation study is sort of running parallel. It's information for the task force, for the community, and for the city council on how we are going to look at blocks A and B, or in this case, the other block D part that we own, right? As we move forward, once the plan and code are adopted, right? So we have more process once we adopt the.
So it's just a supplemental document, it's not part
Correct.
of?
Correct.
Oh, thank you for that question.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
forget,
know.
don't, I thought
have a
it had to get
decision?
I thought it was getting, yeah,
No.
but
Okay.
if, it has no bearing, it's just
No.
informational, and so when we go to
For
write
when
the
we move
RFP, it would be done, even if it was like, let's say it comes in January, I'm just throwing it out there way late, and we're actually able to pull the form-based code and the precise plan in, and it trails, the RFP is not gonna get written until next summer anyway.
Right, correct.
By the
We
time
have
we.
surplus
I'm
land act process, then the RFP process, so yes. But
This
the
helps
key is
me a lot.
adoption. The key is adoption of the
yeah.
precise plan
I
and the
thought they
form-based code.
Okay.
And
yeah.
we're all in agreement on that, right? As this committee, we're all in agreement that those two are the priorities.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
The City Hall
Perfect.
does not derail this process at all.
So I think the 14th is the better date.
And I think,
to ask.
and I
Oh,
think
that's good.
doing both on the same day will be too much.
Yeah.
I think that finance is just going to fly apart brains.
So I know there isn't a definite answer on this, but I want to go back to what Mary was addressing. What could derail this and push it into January, February, March? We're already almost a year behind where we expected to be. As a committee member, I don't want to be sitting here in December and saying, well, maybe in February, maybe in March, maybe in June, maybe in 2080, we'll be able to pass this thing. Our goal was to get this done, get it to council. The longer we wait, the more possibility there is of having it derailed. So are there any other major things that could derail this or push it out into 2024 or later?
Only thing I see that could derail this is commissioner council deferring or needing more than one hearing.
And that's out of our hands.
Correct.
I just want to get it
Yeah.
to them.
Yes.
If they need study sessions, if they need more time, that's on their plate, not ours.
Yeah, we've prepared the documents, we've reviewed the documents, the environmental impact report is done. It's been through its process. We're really at the end of the line here. Last minute details.
Is any study session planned for them, like just as a precautionary?
Yeah, I do not have a study session planned in here. Again, that I originally did. I pulled it out because otherwise that is going to
We
shove us.
talked about it. So
Yeah.
we have already checked in with council a couple times, right? We've given
Yeah,
them an
yes.
update with where we were. We also, when we gave them an update when we went back and asked for more funding for the form-based code. So they've been pretty well versed in where we are and everything, and they're expecting it this year. So when Leslie and I discussed, doing a study session, we're like, why not just study it and approve it? I mean, we're there, right? So we'll do the two for historical and planning.
Adam, I have one other thing.
They're going to be my practice ones, I guess.
You had mentioned probably about 4, 5, 6 months ago, what's the next step? We want to make sure, as a committee, that this doesn't go through city council, they approve it, goes into a desk drawer. 20 years from now, there's another group of people sitting here. So what is the process, or is there a process to start looking at what is the next step to get a shovel into the ground?
We RFP,
Because
right?
from the university's viewpoint, that's one of the reasons we're at the table. We want to help do whatever it takes to move this project and get shovels into the ground, whether that's in a year or 2 years or whatever, instead of having to report back that it's sitting on a shelf somewhere. So I don't know the process. I'm not familiar with it, but Adam, you had
So
mentioned it before.
my goal was, or my objective is to, when we present this to council, or I present this to council, to ask to stay on as a body through the RFP process. You know, that's the finish, right? The finish line is not disposing, but utilizing the city's asset to get this thing started, right? And we would have the best information to know what we need for that catalyst and the background information for the evaluation and all that. So I think hopefully they see all the work that we've done, and that, and, you know, hopefully you all will stay as well. That's another thing. Another probably 6 months to a year.
Maybe less meetings, though.
I hope, and hopefully we'll have a gap too, so we'll have a break right before, because I think they have to get some stuff done, so. But that's my goal. So, all right, so Leslie, just when you check on the 14th, let us know, and I think, now that I understand better, I think that's fine, you can give more time on the yeah.
Is there anyone
Financial.
that knows today that the 14th wouldn't work for them? Works better for you?
Oh, then I would rather have the 21st. No, 14th is fine, thank you. Beeping. What is that?
Okay. So,
Like, does anybody else
I hear it too.
I hear it, I'm like, I'm sorry.
I've been hearing it all night.
Sorry. Okay, no, it's all right. I just like, I'm not hearing things, right? I'm like,
Everybody should have said, we're not hearing anything.
you got, I could tell you, yeah, there's.
And so I have one more report back for you. This is on the community benefits approach.
Okay.
So this, Adam, last meeting, you presented some really interesting information on sort of a different approach for the community benefits. I took that to our city attorney, and he did have some concerns. This is the sort of the bullet list that I've laid out for you. You know, I'm going to really quickly go over it. You know, he did say there is legal authority for us to impose fees on some of the items, right-of-way improvements, art installation. They would take much more legal research to determine if the entire bucket list could be imposed with a fee. He was concerned about charging a fee that would subsidize local retailers. He didn't have much information about that. The other bit he was concerned about is tying a fee to additional square footage and then wanting people to rent the property. We can't really dictate to a property owner what they can and can't do. So that was a concern as well. But his bottom line was what you're requesting to do would require a nexus study because it is a fee. And that is not part of our current scope, is to study a fee. So this could be something that...
What does he recommend? Because we can't approve a plan that we're not getting a bonus for, a
Well,
quantifiable bonus.
to keep the bonus as it's currently written, and that this would be a further action item.
Horrible.
If you want to impose a fee, we really do need a nexus
I'd take all the
study.
bonus out.
Huh?
I wouldn't give any bonus. Because the bonus isn't quantifiable. We've already seen problems over and over again. If they want to use bonus, they can use the state density bonus law.
That's true.
Because the one we have is it's too subjective.
Okay.
So, I mean, I would like to see, some proposals from him on what is legally obtainable from, like, proposing a fee or some kind of calculation, even if it's just, per floor or something. That wouldn't require a nexus study. I mean, we have a nexus study for office space that was done, 5-6 years ago. So I don't know why we couldn't pull from, I mean, I guess it's commercial, but I don't know, I remember it had to do with commercial and seats and what the commercial impact was, but yeah, it doesn't.
Well, I want to, is there any other examples that, yeah, there's a ton.
And they take money.
Fee-based, right?
Oakland, Sunnyvale.
So can we investigate, a couple or have?
Right, like he's saying it can't not be done, just that it would require the additional analysis through the nexus study.
It's just a process that you need to follow because of
Correct.
the state guidelines to impose
No, I understand, but
extra
we've been
fees.
talking about
And it
this
won't
for
extend that
months,
date.
so,
So we're fine.
no, it will extend. I mean, that's the
It would,
problem.
yeah.
Oh.
It would extend, yes.
It's a huge problem. I mean, we've been talking about this and getting a quantifiable standard, so if we needed this, we should have been talking about it a long time ago. I mean, I'm.
For reference, this is
Yeah,
what we have now.
which, I mean, the problem is there's nothing quantifiable in here. It's, you can say whatever you want, and, you know, nobody's metricing to make sure that's a fair level playing field. So I can even see future developers coming in and saying, well, you gave them far more benefit for far less, and just becomes a complete disaster, which is, there's got to be a way that there's a quantifiable means, because
It's dollars.
it's dollars.
It's dollars, period. We got to find cities that are doing that and replicate it.
Well, no, but I mean, I don't understand why, if you're giving them a benefit that's quantifiable in square footage, why you can't charge without, I mean, what do you need?
Could, you just need to do the nexus study.
I'd like the sections from Xander on why. I mean, I need to understand it. I want to know what he's referencing. Because I'm going to go and find out why, if the other studies did the nexus study. I mean, that would be one thing, but there was no mention of it. And also, like our financial advisor, Ben, who has a lot of experience, ESP on doing these, what
Did you
else?
work on the Oakland one?
Some of them he did, so.
I think Ben had early on provided a 45,000 scope for Nexus study. It was part of the optional services with a very initial proposal.
It's not, I don't want a nexus study. I want to know what we can apply without a nexus study. That's better than this. That's more quantifiable than this. That somebody's not, it is straightforward, simplified. If we have to remove subsidy for retail or something, then so be it. But I don't see how applying a fee for a direct quantifiable benefit is out of line, because there's plenty of laws that say we can and legally are allowed to apply a development fee. And I know that there's other fees in other I think, Tasman East has a fee. So did they do a nexus study?
They have an infrastructure fee, yes, and they did a nexus study, yes.
So I guess, we'll have to talk offline. Yeah, this is something that's a problem.
Put it in there and just say pending it. Is the nexus study just quantify it in a specific way?
The city couldn't adopt the fee without
Without a
having the
nexus.
backup of that nexus.
So what I would do, I mean, I would just remove all the bonus density, and then say, if you guys want to add it back in, you need to do a nexus study and pay for it, and you have what we projected as a second story, but we weren't told in time to be able to do it, I guess. I mean, probably should have had it from the get-go.
Is there a way that we could quantify it in the RFP, at least for the block A and B, to set up an example, like some of these density bonus things, more of a negotiation thing than a flat fee on the entire project? The blocks are so different, and the biggest impact we're going to get from is block A and B, and block D, which we partially own. There is some power to those three blocks, and if some of this can be, in interest of time, accommodated more as a negotiation requirements, term sheet requirements in RFP, then just an idea. It's not the best.
Yeah, the RFP would need to conform with the precise plan and the form-based code, which is, the point. I suppose, the city could always negotiate, the council could always negotiate anything they wanted to negotiate at the end of the day through a development agreement.
Yeah, and RFPs, I've sat on both sides and negotiated art, like the case study I presented had a lot of community benefits,
absolutely.
part of the P3 process.
Those should be elements that go into the RFP as art, yes.
Could you also ask Xander, when you ask him for those rules that he's referencing, can you ask him how the state density bonus law would apply? Because it talks about densifying bonus by a percentage, which we obviously don't have. We have floors and height and massing. So I wouldn't expect that it would be 50% of the overall height. And then I know that there was a provision in there that it's a maximum of 3 stories.
Shell, because I've been working for an affordable housing developer for the last 6 months. If you do 100% affordable project under 80% AMI, you get 80% density. But there's a chart I can share. I don't remember the numbers. It's 33 feet height.
32-foot maximum?
Maximum height over the...
Or 3 stories, right?
3 stories, yeah.
3 stories.
So if what you can accommodate in that...
I didn't remember the 32 feet, but I remember the 3 stories, so okay.
And it's maximum 80% density based on how many units and what income level you're going with. So the maximum is 80% density bonus, or
80%, yeah.
80% and height 33 feet, so whatever you fit, but there is also a very well-defined unit mix that has to go in that volume.
Yes, correct. You can only have 20% moderate and.
Yeah.
No. I was more concerned because it talks about density bonus, which is a different metric than what we have. Sorry, I wasn't talking like, that's all. So, okay. I just want to confirm that that is how it applies then, that it would be a 32-foot max based on the sliding scale that's in the state law, based on the affordability level and the percentage of affordable housing included in the project. Because I would just do that.
I'll share a link which is very easy to comprehend, written by a law firm breaking down the law, so it might help.
Thanks. Okay. And if we can get those answers, I guess, if we can provide them before the 14th, that'd be great, if possible, please. We need to kind of understand so we can make a decision on how we want to proceed, because we don't have time. That's all, that's the only reason. I think everybody kind of needs to be prepped on what options are available, so that way everybody can come ready for a decision. Thanks, Leslie. Yeah. I don't have any other questions. Anybody else?
I have a comment.
Yes.
All right, is this on? So this Tuesday, council is voting on a general plan amendment to 950 Monroe. This building is not in compliance, as we all know, with the form-based code that we've been working for since 12 of 2018. The height's 72 feet, 73 feet. Lamb from Atherton bought the property in mid-21, knowing that the community does not want parcel by parcel development, and to actually plan a significant area of Santa Clara so buildings are synergistic. This would be the first precise plan, as we again all know, in city history and well overdue. If this is approved, you know, it's not just this property. There are properties up and down Homestead and Benton. This guy gets his way, somebody else is going to buy a piece of property and say, I want 8 stories. And there's a good chance that this beautiful precise plan that we've been working for the last 4 years, and 7 for us, is going to be in the tunnel. You're going to have 8 stories all the way around it. So this is a big damn deal on Tuesday night, and I plead with everybody on DCTF to attend and voice your opposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. All right, any other comments from the DCTF members? All right, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting of August 17th, 2023?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say no. All right, thanks, everybody. Please keep to your email, look out, because Leslie's going to look to see if it's going to be the 21st, or we might move it to the 14th. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Adam. Good job. Thank you, guys.